This is Rebecca Lowe, or Rebecca Lua, if you listen to Suboptimal Radio, and you are listening to Men in Blazers on the NBC Sports Network.
It's unbelievable!
Oh, Roger.
It's all Tom Cruise's fault.
From the Embassy Road studios in the crap part of Bedford and the crap part of the South Fork of Long Island. It's a Men in Blazers Spotify Green Room Euro 2020 final played in 2021 Instant Reaction Pod.
Oh, God, Davo, what did we just sit through? 30 years of hurt. Never stopped me dreaming. Football's coming.
No, it's not coming home. It's not coming home.
It did come home. It did come home. It just didn't stay very long.
Yeah, the US men's national team will probably beat Haiti tonight. They'll thump them, and football's coming home for you, Rog. And what am I going to do? What about you? You've got a Nations League win. You got a CONCACAF Nations League win. You got a Gold Cup about to arrive on your doorstep. Oh,
what an agony, Davo. What a human agony. Let's get into it. Let's break it down.
Literally, to paint a picture, as I'm standing in my bedroom, and out in the garden, I can see at the far end my son still standing there in tears. He's been crying non-stop for 25 minutes, wearing his England shirt.
We've all been there. We've all been
miserable.
there. We've all
just
been
miserable.
there. And
I need him to kick a ball and smash a window.
You generationally have to tell him it will all be okay, which is the biggest lie that you will ever tell your son, I hope, because it won't. It won't.
It will.
It's
only football.
It's hard to communicate, but it's about memory and collective memory, and so many of the ghosts of the past. I don't even care. I had no horse in this race.
No, zero.
Let's get into this for the final time.
Yeah,
what
we are
a
on
journey
Spotify
we've been
Green
on.
Room. It has been a journey, Rog.
Yeah, we've been lifted by your question, your love, your everything, your gems. We have got a lot to get through together. This is going to be like in treatment, this with Davo and Rog on the couch and you lifting us up. What a platform this is. So, Davo, let's dive in.
Okay, for those of you on Green Room with us right now, you know the drill. Ask those questions in the chat section. We'll take the best ones at the end of the show. Can you kick this whole thing off with a toast, Rogelio?
Let me open my bud. That's so good. Let me have a slip. I raise this first bud of the day to human agony. This was a day. This is a day for all those who support the English national team, a team who for so long have been synonymous with heartbreak, with tears, with self-sabotage. And to some degree, I did make a note, like, what would England be without the losing? And so it came to pass, a day that just slots in rather nicely to the Battle of Hastings, the Battle of Saratoga, Scott of the Antarctic, Dunkirk, and now this, Davo, Euro 2020 in 2021. Let's break it down.
You know what? This was closer than most of those. Scott of the Antarctic, I have no comment, but this was much closer than those other defeats. Okay, Rog, Italy won. England won. The Azzurri prevailed, as you all know, on penalties. England drew first blood just 117 seconds into the game.
Didn't we almost have it all?
No, it was way too early, Rog, with an incisive attacking move that saw Kieran Trippier tease a beautiful ball to the streaking Luke Shaw, who thumped a first-timer past Donnarumma. Amazing half volley. England continued to look bright for the remainder of the first half, but as the game carried on, they sat deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And in the 67th minute, Leonardo Bonucci latched onto some Italian corner scraps. God, that was a messy goal to equalise. It wouldn't be Euro 2020 without extra time, Rog, although there was no own goal. And into extra time we went, and after 30 minutes of free football, we were still scoreless. And the game headed to penalties, where despite two terrific Jordan Pickford saves, misses from the babies, Rog, Rashford, Sancho and Saka, two of them saved by Donnarumma. That means that Italy are champions of Europe. And I have to say, they deserved the victory.
Yeah, there is no argument at all here, but we will get to that. We have to start at the very beginning. We have to rewind like the George Michael sports machine and go Go to the hours of pre-match carnage, Davo. A reminder, the scenes before the game. Really, to those of you and many in America that have never really understood why big Derby Day games in England kick off so bloody early in the morning, I will say an 8 p.m. kickoff giving English fans about, give or take, 12 hours too many to booze it up, Davo. Those scenes around Wembley before kickoff, I mean, reminiscent of what it used to be like to get a match in the 80s, same as it ever was, Davo.
Yeah, I haven't read a lot about it, but I do know that there was some behavior that was just like absolutely appalling. And yes, it's a minority, but that doesn't excuse it. It's just inexcusable and awful.
I think it's a story that we're going to hear a lot more of. I know UEFA tried to smother it and play it down in the moment. I'm sure as more footage comes out, it is actually going to look worse and worse and worse in a true human darkness. And I'm saying that now. God knows what's going to happen tonight. And I'll just say, be safe. Be safe. Everyone in England, God, please be safe and be sensible. But to the football, what a foe. I mean, really, before the game, because we read the English papers, because we see the world through an English Premier League lens, it's very easy to make the case England with this team of destiny. But this Italian team, 4-time world champion, they'd already won the Eurovision Song Contest this year.
The big one.
Yeah.
The big one. This was just candy. This didn't really matter.
Beaten in 33 matches, the longest such run. A team who had never lost to England in major tournament. They had their own bloody incredible narrative of destiny, their own rebound from humiliation and darkness of failure when they didn't qualify at all for the 2018 World Cup. A team who bellow out that national anthem like no other. Brothers of Italy, let one flag, one hope gather us. The hour has struck for us to unite. I mean, Gareth Southgate, the minister for caution, changing his lineup for the 37th game running. Kieran Trippier ahead of Saka, 3-4-3, the one that fended off Germany. Take me back to your mindset moments before kickoff, David. You're England in a final that you've long dreamt about. You got to see this. Can you re-summon your pre-match emotions?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was looking forward to it, a lot this weekend. And I must say the air went out of me a little bit when I saw the lineup because, I wanted us to attack this final. And I think I have to say it, and obviously, Gareth Southgate deserves a lot of credit for everything he's done in this tournament, just as Thomas Tuchel deserves a lot of credit for what he's done at Chelsea. But it has ushered in this age of football where we play 2 holding midfielders and 5 defenders. And it's a very tough way with all of England's attacking talent and all of our bench, so many forward-thinking players. We're just relying on defenders who are not as good. Certainly in the middle, they're not as good footballers as Italy's defenders are in the same position. They can't do as many things. And so I must say I had a little sigh, and I knew why Gareth Southgate did it, because he feels like Italy are a better footballing side, and so he wants to be defensive, and that's how he's got his team to this place. But I must say I was a little deflated before kickoff.
Yeah, I have to say, we very quickly... I thought in the moment, Gareth Southgate wants to be second-guessed by all the pundits one last time for old time's sake. But the thing before kickoff I couldn't stop thinking about was what Verratti said about how this final would be won in the mind. It was his quote that stuck with me. I think that the team that plays with a mind that is free will gain the upper hand, and how that came to pass. But we didn't know from the beginning. Ultimately, England... My Lord, it started, actually, it was a nervy start in the first minute.
Yeah.
Maguire giving away that corner awkwardly. But my God, when they got their composure, David, what a moment. Harry Kane on the half turn, so lethal. He's like Mahomes rolling out the pocket. And he pushed the ball forward. You just felt the energy in Wembley crackle alive. What did you see?
Yeah, it was one of the only times where Italy got caught out all too far forward from a set piece. Luke Shaw started off the move with some amazing football from his sort of left wing back role, started the move. The ball broke to Kane. Kane literally half the England midfielder literally pointing to Kane. It's like those guys who work at the airport steering planes in. They're showing him where to put the ball. He puts the ball to Trippier. Shaw is then calling for the ball. I don't think Italy don't understand like regular Western hand signals. They only know Neapolitan hand gestures. They don't understand what's happening. The ball is going there to Trippier. Trippier's going to hit it back post to Luke Shaw, who does what he has rarely done at almost any level of football. He just scores an unbelievable goal. Half volley inside the near post of Donnarumma, 1-0 to England.
By the way, on that goal, I did love Kyle Walker just giving it bifters to get around Trippier, pull a defender away, create more space for the cross. Yes, Trippier, stunning ball over. Luke Shaw, derided Luke Shaw. Mourinho's personal reek, Luke Shaw, stormed in, slapped it home. Thick boy summer. And I will say in that moment, my God, Gareth Southgate,
looks like a genius.
One fullback finding the other fullback after you play 5 across the back. That was a Wembley roar that could be heard by bloody Branson up in space. It was just like, nation, take your shirts off. An incredible moment we got to witness together. Lord Shaw of Bishop's Itchington being knighted or whatever the hell they do. And it felt absolutely ginormous. But Dave, how do you say too early in Italian? Is it al dente? Is that how you say it, al dente? Is that what you said? Is that what you said?
I don't think it's al dente, but I'll look it up and I'll let you know.
Is that what you said to yourself? Did you? Ian Dark immediately started moaning about the semi-final against Croatia that was too early. Did you feel that, or did it feel like, no, England, team of destiny?
Ian Dark is so depressing commentating on England. He literally foresaw the England goal. I blame him for the entire thing. Look, I think that it was, what England had to do in that 3-man defence and wide lineup, they had to do that at the point that the ball turned over. They had to break fast upfield. And I think for a lot of reasons, which we'll discuss, England never were able to break upfield again in the entire match off the Italy turnover because Italy were going to possess the ball so much more. And it ended up just being, look, both of these teams are very difficult to score against, and getting a 1-0 lead. Look, we'll talk about it later, but Italy scored a fairly fortunate goal to get back into the game. They were the better team without any doubt, but both of these teams are very difficult to score against.
We will get there. At Aussie AB tweeted us, a guy just walked into our bar and shouted, "Soccer's coming home!" We had to correct him. I just love that's my favourite tweet of the day. In this moment, Italy rattled, and the greatest strength, that midfielder Jorginho, Verratti, Barella, tried to take control of the game, but every time they pushed forward in the first 20 minutes, England looked to overwhelm them on the counter. Just the lack of Sinazzola hurting them so badly. Emerson, in those early exchanges, he loves to attack the defending, not so much. And Italy just looked absolutely off kilter.
Yeah.
England knew they'd only conceded once, 5 clean sheets before this tournament. And for that first half, much of that first half, England dominated. Even when Italy had the ball in dangerous spaces, you had Phillips, Bielsa's English son, you had Declan Rice snapping with ferocity.
Yeah.
And their decision-making, it was so un-Italian. It was harried, it was rushed, it was uncalibrated. Chip Chiesa had one run and a post-grazer of a shot. But, my God, England looked in control of the game.
Yeah, and at one point I looked at my notes and I wrote, Declan Rice looks like the best footballer on the park. He was he was superb. Troppo presto is too early in Italian, Rog. Troppo presto. So, but I did think that the ref, and this became an issue for England, and I think this is to some extent a reaction of what happened in the Denmark game. The ref was not calling anything. He was letting them play, which a lot of people in football, myself included, quite like. Let them play football. He wasn't letting easy fouls go. So when England were regaining possession and there was a little foul, a little bit of contact, he wasn't calling it. And so I think the Italians reacted to that very fast and realized that they weren't going to let England get on top of them because they would just stop the contact pretty early on.
Yeah, I mean, England, when they did have the ball, I did delight in that first half. Cellini and Bonucci, 2 giants, 219 caps between them, combined age of 70. I mean, Raz, Kane, Mount buzzed around them like little cigarette boats around huge oil tankers. And my God, what we can say is tactically, this game was Euro 2020 at its apex. Because the Italians play so well together with so much collective spirit. They almost solve problems like a club team. And they did eventually find their rhythm. It is so hard to do what Italy did. which is to find a rhythm in the international game. And they really did. Somewhere around the final third of that first half, whatever that is mathematically, they did start to take an upper hand, and England really finished the first half by sitting deep, and God, just daring them onto them. I will say, England did look unruffled in that first half, but it was ominous, Davo. It was really an ominous omen.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was ominous because England's three attacking players, Raheem Sterling, Harry Kane, particularly Mason Mount, are just on defensive duty the entire time. The further that England sit back, they're just defending. And so they're in no position. And so England was starting at the end of the first half, certainly the beginning of the second half, they were just clearing to nothing, clearing to no one. And it was just coming onto them wave after wave.
That disappointed me because
totally agreed.
You saw the Italians came out from that locker room at halftime with a plan, with an idea, with a recommitment, and England just did more of the same. They sat deep and they had decided we got here by shutting out opponents as our first and second prerogative. We are going to do that now for 45 minutes. A bold move, but they essentially were going to say, we believe you cannot hurt us for 45 minutes, and how that approach came back to haunt them. Chiesa started to create... What were you going to say, David?
I just think it's I think it's going to be interesting to hear what Gareth Southgate says post-game about the halftime adjustment, because Italy certainly adjusted to get on the ball much more, showed a lot more patience on the ball, moved the ball a little bit quicker. England, I think, just looked harried on the ball again and again and again. And there were moments where they could have controlled the tempo more, and they didn't. You know, Gareth Southgate said before the game that in any final, you know, teams have to keep up the same levels. And, you know, Gareth Southgate understands the tactical levels of this team. They look at it in terms of passes completed, the amount of their running, the amount that they press, all those kind of things. And England's level dropped in the second half. And I would say that was some of the worst football they've played in this entire tournament.
I agree. I mean, Chiesa started to just create panic all over the place. Pickford, I will say, what a save. What a fine save, which will be lost in this reliving of the game. An immense save, getting down low, just immense. I was about to tweet that the Queen needs to smelt a statue of Picky to stand in Parliament Square. Oh, when Italy struck off a corner, flicked on by Verratti. Oh, Davo, what happened? Chaos.
I mean, it was chaos. I don't exactly know what happened. I haven't watched enough replays, but I know England missed the first header, and I think they missed the second ball. John Stones was in a, you know, MMA match with whoever he was marking. I think maybe Bonucci, and Pickford got to the ball, put it against the post. It came off the inside of the post right to Bonucci. I mean, not my favourite Italian player for a multitude of reasons, mainly to do with your friend Moise Kean. And he put the ball in the back of the net.
Picky scooped the ball off the shot, but straight back up the gut to Bonucci, who rammed it home with deliriousness, standing on the hoardings in front of the Italian fan base who saw him as a hero that he was, as he did the I am the resurrection pose. A massive goal for a man who had smothered Kane all game long. And the hard thing with football, especially at the international level, when you see momentum, it's hard to turn it back on again. And Southgate sought to stem the tide, flinging on Saka for Trippier. But the Italians had tasted blood. They kept coming. There were 10 wayward moments where it felt like, football did come home, but only quickly. It only wanted to do its laundry, and then it left again. Rog told us it was going to get a pint of milk and never return, David.
I thought you made a brilliant point a couple of minutes ago when you said that Italy behaved like a club side. You know, they are so, through the age groups, through the levels, they are so attuned to playing with each other. And this England team, and let's not take anything away from this, they've done amazingly in this tournament, but they still don't quite know how to play with each other. They still don't quite know, you know, at every single phase of the game, how to, you know, find the best of each other and understand each other's movement. And Italy were just superior to them in doing that. And England they just seemed unsyncopated for the first time since the Scotland game in this tournament.
Oh, God. Oh, mate. So then Italy lose Chiesa. Tussle with Calvin Phillips. I'm not a doctor. It looked like the kind of injury that only an Italian goal would heal, but it was worse than that. And he limped off. And without him, his direct, incisive threat, Italy were just lesser. And the game became really like a knife fight in the mud. Just a lot of both sides diving, flopping, wanking around. England were really holding on towards the end, outplayed massively, to such an extent. I think some of the England fans actually put their shirts back on. Started to have a
I think England... Yeah, I think England... Are you talking about the second half or injury or extra time?
I mean, they definitely came alive in extra time. But, man, they were... But towards the end of that second half, I think beers were actually drunken instead of prepared to be flung in the air. And the game really felt, dark. I mean, there were a couple of Raz forays, solo forays to nowhere.
Yeah.
Extra
very
time,
little
though.
football. Very little football was played after... the 70-minute mark of the game. There was very little football, very little action.
Extra time, huge stakes for England. Huge stakes. If they knew if they won that their fans would destroy the country, and if they lost, their fans would destroy the country. And the only thing we knew for sure is that a national hero would rise in whatever was left of this game. 99th minute, cometh the hour, cometh the Grealish. His impact, I would say, felt a little bit, but the honest truth is the team around him was so unbelievably knackered by the time he came on. It just felt like a mental, physical, and for England, a battle against history and the ghosts that have haunted this national team for decades, like change, Davo. I mean, that's what I didn't understand. You kind of felt Southgate had Sancho and Rashford there to make history with a gamble, fling them on against those tired Italian legs. But Gareth's not a gambler. He doesn't know when to hold them, when to fold them. He was never going to put them on, was he?
Well, England, I think, scored too early and then substituted too late. The Grealish substitution happened too late. Definitely Rashford and Sancho came on way too late, so almost their first action in the game was the penalty shootout. Although I'm not sure that England would win if they did 10 penalty shootouts against the Italians and Donnarumma. I don't think they'd win one of them. I think that was the best result they could possibly get in a penalty shootout against Italy. But it was he was very cautious, and he's been cautious the whole tournament. Now, that's what England have ridden to get there to the final. But ultimately in the final, as so often happens it's so Thomas Hardy, Rog, so much the roots of English tragedy. I think that's what did them in the end.
To penalties. Narrative 1, England 0. I kind of hoped, first of all, before we get into the match, can you describe to an American audience psychologically, as an Englishman, because you're the only one of us who is, what are penalties to the English national psyche?
Well, before we get to that, let's just say, as I tweeted before that happened, penalties are no way to end a football game. Italy were the better team. I think, honestly, I would have rather just had a team of judges say, who was the better team? Italy with the better team. Let's award it to them on points. I would have had no problem with it. I think penalties are just agony, and they end up creating scapegoats. And certainly in terms of the scapegoats that are going to be created from this on an England side, I just loathe it. None of these three young boys deserve to be scapegoats in any way whatsoever. And I think we can say, oh, no, they won't be. But you know what? They probably will be. And that will hang on them, and it'll hang around their necks, and they will probably hold it themselves for the rest of their careers. And I think it's just terrible. This is a team game. It's not an individual sport.
We've said that all the way through. Particularly to England, Davo, particularly to England. There's a deep history with penalties. It's a deeply unkind history. It's like Ben Simmons and free throws at a national level. To Americans, I'm trying to think about what is as terrifying as an Englishman and penalties. The only thing I could think of is people who put ketchup on hot dogs.
Or the Trump presidency. I don't know. But England have really, gone and one-up themselves. They've now lost a final of a major tournament on penalties. They've never done that before. I don't think these kids bring the weight of what's happened previously to it. I think they're all too young to have done it, but it's the same things that afflict. And I think to talk about Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka and Marcus Rashford and imagine that they are beset by the same problems of, you know, their predecessors who've been so bad at it, I think it's insulting to them. But, you know, penalties have a way of this happening. Italy have already won a penalty shootout in this tournament. That must give them incredible confidence. Donnarumma is like an incredible goalkeeper in a penalty shootout. That's going to give them incredible confidence.
He's just a big unit. He's just a big unit. I mean, it started 1-1. Kane finishing clinically, and then Belotti.
Yeah.
I've got to say, he looked so bloody nervous before he took his, so dead, and it was just an incredible MacGuffin ultimately. But Jordan Pickford and his penis made a goal parried, and it felt so right. Maguire, what can we just say? Harry Maguire lost in all this. That penalty, my God,
he broke the camera. That was amazing.
It was amazing. I mean, he shocked the world, both with the lethal clinicality of his finish, and also I was shocked because he didn't try and head the penalty home. But then, oh my God, while we were marvelling, Marcus, why Marcus, David? Why Marcus just a force for good? Marcus, a man of wonder. Marcus, a joyous footballer who really had not played enough, arguably, in this tournament, thrown in cold. And you can see he tried to do like the Rashford version of the Jorginho, the little skip, and Donnarumma stayed up tall, didn't give him what he was looking for, which was a hint of movement. And you can almost see he's in mid-flight, and you almost see the moment where Rashford's like, oh, crap. And his little heart breaks with the world watching. It was a gutter of a moment.
And it looked worse than it was because it looked like he missed an open goal, because by the end it was an open goal. But it was terrible. And, you know, of all the guys with everything that he's contributed over the past couple of years, of all the people to have that awful moment, you know, Marcus Rashford. But then Jordan Pickford just gets England back into it, Rod.
That was an incredible moment, outfoxing Jorginho. I mean, that was like watching one of those great war movies where, you know, the great American sniper is on the hunt for the greatest German sniper of all time. It was utterly a magnificent moment, outfoxing Jorginho. Surely there's some kind of trophy that should be smelted for that moment, but we had to move on. The trouble with penalties, the narrative is just absolutely spunking out all over the place. And suddenly we got Saka at the spot, David, and I've got to ask you, you're Gareth Southgate, you know firsthand the agony of a penalty under the pressure, the crucible, the nightmare. Why would you let a 19-year-old, never mind, I mean, we now know he missed, but why would you even risk just this player that's going to, please God, play for England for the next 10, 12, 13 years? Why would you, this is a risk-averse man, why would you send him up to, it's almost cruel to witness what he experienced?
Well, I'm sure that England have trained extensively in penalties, and I'm sure that, you know, these substitutions of Rashford and Sancho were made, and Bukayo Saka was in there because they knew that he's a very good penalty taker. And I imagined he was going to do what Ashley Cole did in the Champions League final and smash it in very, very hard top right. He didn't. It was a slightly tentative, well, more than a slightly tentative. It was a very tentative penalty. And the fact is that you cannot recreate on the training ground what happens in a major competitive knockout match, and certainly in terms of a final. And I've got to ask a question even beyond Southgate. You know, there was a moment before when you've got to understand why some of the other leaders of England's team aren't there, who are on the field taking penalties at that point.
Who would you have liked?
I mean, I think I'd have liked to see Raheem Sterling take a penalty at that point. I think I'd have liked to have seen, you know, one of the fullbacks who's already, you know, played. Certainly, I think Kieran Trippier was off at that point, but Luke Shaw was still on. I'd have liked to have seen a more senior player. Jack Grealish, I'd have liked to have seen take a player to see those three boys, literally, they were just getting younger and younger and younger as they were coming up. It just seemed a little, the optics on it just didn't look great for me.
You know what's fascinating about this England team ultimately, and Miguel Delaney wrote about this week, the team culture is remarkable. Like when we were, in the golden generation, the team culture was terrible. It was like Liverpool against Manchester United, and the big players, the best players were meant to be real divas in the England setting. And Miguel wrote about how this is a team culture of mates who love being together. And the odd thing about it is that the veteran players know that the younger players are actually the stars. And that has been a strength of England throughout this tournament. And then at the very last, it did come back to destroy them. This was all my life, England have been football's New York Knicks. And I guess they are now like in the same ether as the other teams again to finals and then crap the bed. This is like a Buffalo Bill-esque performance, which is a different kind of agony, but progress.
I'm not going to criticise them for how they performed in the penalty shootout. Jordan Pickford saved 2 penalties. Italy they weren't exactly amazing in the penalty shootout either. It ended up being 3-2. I know you can't say these are lotteries because they're not lotteries. They require practice. They require training. And we always look at the teams that do well and we say, and in hindsight, we create a whole way that they've prepared better than everybody else. I'm sure England prepared superbly for this. It's just penalty shootouts. One team is going to win. One team is going to lose. I think if I'm going to be critical of England in this match, and if they just didn't come out and play their best football in the final of the tournament. And sometimes that happens. Anybody who's played competitive sport to a very high level who's on this green room understands that sometimes you go out and you don't play at your highest level. And England, whether it was scoring too early, whether it was just their defensive setup with their where it is, or maybe it's just because Italy are a much better football team, or the pressure got to the England players. They didn't play their best football. The best team won today. That's the thing I really come out of it more than anything else. I wouldn't put it more down. I wouldn't put it down to the penalty shootout really very much.
I have no doubt the best team won, and we'll burn Italy up first. I mean, as a loss, this was very much like Croatia 2018 all over again. Ian Dart was actually retrospectively right, but huge credit to Italy. They deserve this. Huge respect to Roberto Mancini, who took over a squad that was in a wreck state. They'd failed to qualify. Mighty Italy failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. A shame, an agony, a humiliation that turned the fan base against the team. It's the first time the country had failed to do so. I think in 60 years, he gelled this squad. He built belief into them, and he built a tactical cohesion that is so... It would be like on English television shows for kids when we grew up, when they got scissors out and cut things, they'd say, don't try this at home. This is really for adult. Other teams should not try and emulate what Italy do. It's unbelievably hard. Do not try this at home. I guess Greg Berhalter I'm speaking to in that moment. But Italy were the best team in this tournament. They played with wonder. They had their own narrative of redemption, and they deserve this in every single way. And I don't know if you want to add something before we eulogise England and then take questions from GFOPs.
No, I totally agree with you. They're an outlier. They're a team without a major striker. I don't think they were very impressive going forward today, apart from Chiesa, who looks dangerous. I think he looks like the best player in the entire tournament, Rog. But they don't look dangerous going forward. They don't look like they've got a lot of goals in them. They don't blow you away, but they're just every single one of them is just a great footballer. It's an amazing centre-back partnership. Their spine is so strong. They're so strong up the middle. I thought Berardi had a fantastic game today as well, next to Jorginho. I don't think they were sparkling up front. They got their goal off a set piece with corner scraps, as we said. But they find a way. They're having amazing team unity, amazing belief, and that will take you a long way in international football.
England, I really feel for this team. Before the game, I had to do a sound check for CNN in London, and it was an Irish guy who was checking me in, and he said, "Good luck in the football." I was like, "Mate, honestly, I'm from Liverpool. It's like I said, I'm hoping for England because so many of my family have had a dark time over the past couple of years." And he goes, in his Irish accent, he said, "Legally, I am meant to cheer for whoever England are facing in a tournament, but he said, this team are so remarkable. These lads are so beloved. These lads have done so much good, such a force of good on LGBTQ rights, anti-racism, child poverty and hunger, mental illness. He's like, you can't not cheer for this English team. And I think to a large degree, beating Germany, doing what they did, changing an entire nation's sense of self, which is deeply, deeply powerful. I remember France in 1982 in the World Cup. Before that, they were Little France, Petit France. They saw themselves as an inferior France who were perpetual losers. And they changed 2 years. They got to the semi-final of the World Cup, and 2 years later they won the Euros. And that changed their entire national perception of themselves to a France qui gagne, a France that wins. And I do believe this team, Davo, so bloody beloved, this team so talented, this team driven by redemption and making a nation that wants many players, Raz making a nation that once scorned him, bow down, Harry Kane in tournament, drop him, we howled, scores goals, Harry Maguire, scandal-fueled wreck 12 months ago, loyally stood by, fantastic in this tournament, John Stones, Hendo, Pickford, and above all, Gareth Southgate, Davo. I mean, God, I wonder how he feels, though, that pain of the missed penalty from 96 and now this.
Yeah, I think he'll feel terrible for the boys who missed. And I think this is an England team who will learn from this. And I don't think they're going away. I don't think England are going to disappear and back into the backwaters of international football, which is where we were for the 70s and 80s. We briefly flickered to life in the 90s and then sort of went away again and have had disappointment after disappointment with the golden generation in the 2000s. I think this England team will be back, and I think they'll be very strong. I don't know about Qatar. I don't even know if that tournament's going to happen. But I think as global tournaments go ahead, I think England are going to be good. Too many good footballers coming up. Too much depth. And I think, let's hope, I think Gareth Southgate is the right man because I think he learns. I think he learns every single time he goes through a major tournament. And I think they'll learn from this at the FA, and I think we'll be better next time.
God willing. So I've got to say, Gareth Southgate, I think Barney Renee wrote about Gareth Southgate like that he looks like a beloved army officer who secretly writes war poems. And I adore that description of the man, his leadership, his nobility, his emotional intelligence. But enough from us. Let us dive in, David. Let us pivot to the part that makes the Spotify green room the room that we just love being in.
Yeah, let's get to the Q&A portion of the show. We're going to call you up onto the stage, invite you to speak. When you move to the stage, please just remember to stay muted until we call on you. Rog, who is up first?
Lots of talk in the chat about Martinique taking a 10th minute lead over Canada in the Gold Cup. A goal heard round the footballing world. Shout out to Ryan Clark for that. But let's begin where we should begin on this night of nights. Live from London, it's Mr. Chris Willis. Chris Willis. Hello, gorgeous. Are you there? Oh, mate. Chris Willis, come back to us. I think one Jägermeister shot too many for the beautiful Chris Willis. Let us go to another Chris. Oh, the mighty Chris of Joyce. Are you there, Chris Joyce?
Yes, guys. Thank you. I'm here.
Where are you, mate? And what's your question?
Coming from East Long, Massachusetts, from outside of Boston.
God's country. What is going on in your head? What do you want to talk about us?
You know, honestly, great game. Got to watch it with my 9-month-old old son, Desmond. When Pickford made that save, I jumped up, got really excited. He kind of got sad, was crying just because the excitement was so much. But in general, my question is, when soccer came on, I had this idea that is a moment too big for a youngster. And then when he had to take that penalty with the big moment coming up, once again, I had that idea. Was the moment just too big for him? And do you guys agree that there could be a moment just too big for a youngster? Because I know in the past we've talked about, they're too young to know the moment is too big. But this time I just felt like the moment was too big for them.
It's a great question, Chris Joyce. David?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes youth, they're too young to know any better. it looked like it did get too much for Bukayo Saka at the end, but that's because we saw him go up and miss. And I think other times, Donnarumma dives a different way, and even with a not particularly well taken penalty, it goes in, and we think, the young man has balls of steel and makes it. I think penalty shootouts, I know we're not allowed to say they're a lottery. I know we're not allowed to say they're random, but too many things conspire to make those situations so strange. So, yes, I wish that we'd had more experienced players taking it, but that's hindsight itself. Who knows? Look, I think the big thing is you've got to learn from it and you've got to grow from it. And champions, we saw a great one today. Novak Djokovic, won his 20th Grand Slam at Wimbledon this morning, beating Matteo Berrettini. His first Grand Slam final, I think, was when he was 20 years old. And I think he lost it and he learned from that and kept on moving. And I think that, these young players have got to see a whole career in front of them and they've got to put themselves in that situation again.
Your question hints, Chris, at the Jurgen Klinsmann story. I always tell that when he picked a ton of raw talent for 2014 World Cup, he kept shouting, "Sometimes you are too young to know to be afraid." And that is true, but also sometimes you are too young to know enough to handle a situation. And the reality with penalties, I am sure, I've watched club teams practice penalties on Premier League training grounds, and my God, it is awe-inspiring and awesome. But the reality with penalty shootouts, what makes them so cruel and brutal is that you cannot replicate the psychological conditions under which the actual penalty shootout goes down. So I would imagine Saka was just like shooting the lights out when they practice penalties, just like humiliating keeper after keeper. I imagine with a dazzling array of different tricks that he's taught himself over, hours spent training on them and in cages across England and just really grinding away at that skill. But then you are faced with the psychological pressure that you can't replicate in training. And there was a manager, I can't remember who it was, but who at the end of every game that he played in a tournament, when, after the handshakes and the players clap the fans, he would make his players practice penalties in the stadium after the game while the fans were still there. It wasn't the same, but it was close enough. He made them stand at the halfway line and do that. That's what kills you, by the way. Less the penalty itself. It's more the walk from the halfway line to the penalty spot than where just the feelings that we can't even imagine just start to brew and unleash themselves inside these elite athletes' minds and hearts and blood systems and nervous systems and overwhelm them. So, ultimately there'll be more talked about. What I should say is I bloody hope the English press do not vilify, the fan bases don't vilify, that there's not chance. I actually would like to believe in this moment that it will not be that case. These are such good kids. They have done such great work. They've made the nation so bloody happy when it needed it, but we will see. We will see.
Yeah, I don't think the press will do that, but fan bases I can't speak for.
Ryan Clark believes that Chris Willis has finally gone to let out that poo that's been brewing all tournament. So let's go to Doug
there
Henley.
he is.
What, is he here? Chris
is in.
Chris!
Guys.
Chris, how are you doing, mate? Where are you? Describe the mental state.
I'm in the middle of Wembley. The rain is hammering down, and I'm trying to find a tube station.
What's the mood, Chris? What emotional swing have you been to? Did you allow yourself for a minute to think it was coming home?
All morning, before the game, I did not allow myself to believe that. I just assumed that there's no way I'd actually turn up to an England game and we win a trophy. Absolutely not. And then we went 1-0 up in about, a minute and a half?
Yeah, minute 46.
God, I thought, here it comes. It's actually going to happen. And, of course, it went to penalties. The second the final whistle went after extra time, everyone in the stadium, I think, went, oh, no.
How did you evaluate the tournament, Chris? Do you feel like ultimately you take the great memories and it feels like a success to get this close? Or to not get it in that old traditional way, the poison chalice of penalties, does it make it feel even crueler?
I think he's gone. I think the rain has taken him, Rog.
I think Chris is lost to us. I think Chris is currently probably he's probably looting a hot dog stand just outside of Wembley. Couldn't give up that opportunity. Let's go to Doug Henley. Come be with us. Where are you, Doug? And what's your question?
Raj, Davo, great to talk to you both. You've been a huge inspiration to me over the last year. I'm calling in from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, I love that place more than I can tell you. What's your question, Doug?
I'm wondering, what would you say to Rashford, Saka, and Sancho so they don't suffer for so long like Southgate did? And what would you say to anyone young that's facing a failure that seems so big that they can't overcome it?
Well, I mean, look, almost every great athlete, almost every great sportsman or sportswoman has dealt with adversity in their career, and they're more defined by how they bounce back from adversity than how they continue to lead from the front and just go, 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 go. And I think this will be the definition of them. And I think this will be a moment and the story is going to be written. You know, they are all so young. They all have so much career in front of them. You know, Jadon having gone through this huge transfer, you know, Rashford with this incredible year he's had where he's become, you know, not just an elite athlete, but also a statesman of some kind. And Saka, who's come alive, who's caught the, you know, certainly the football world's attention during this tournament. They have so much ahead of them. I think their England teammates have so much ahead of them. And I think now we'll learn a lot more about them.
You know, ultimately, penalties are bloody hard. You know, Bashir, one of the greatest players I've ever seen with my own eyes, missed a penalty in a shootout. Maradona, Zidane, great player. And Mbappe in this tournament. Mbappe was the one who fell France. Indeed, you know, the psychological studies that talk about how the superstars of the teams actually fail more often than the everyday players because the pressure is so much more intense. And one of the things I admire most about the entire English squad, and I hit this point earlier, when you go through that squad, almost all of them have micro narratives of redemption and tenacity. I mean, they are, because they're English. Being English, you are naturally written off and discarded. The English love to tall poppy syndrome, cut down their heroes. So to be an English footballer, you have to deal with failure, perceived failure and real failure. And so many of these English players were forged through failure and have come out stronger as winners. There's players on that squad, across that squad. Look at Hendo. Look at Hendo and his narrative where, you know, he came through up in Sunderland and then was seen to be not just a failure, but a joke of a footballer, a discard. Liverpool wanted to get rid of him and he had to almost beg to stay. And then look what he became through the crucible and the transformation of rising to his true level. And that's ultimately, we've talked about it a lot on this show, Arsene Wenger's statement about what separates the good players from the great is truly at the end of the day tenacity. That is the most important quality. And we know those three players are insanely talented. And now with this experience, and by the way, I'm glad Gareth Southgate's there to lead them through this trauma. They will bounce back. They will bounce back. And I do believe they'll be unstoppable. Thanks for your question. We are going to go to the great Colleen Dempsey. Colleen, where are you? And what's your question?
Hi, Raj. Hi, Davo. My name's Colleen. I am from Troy, New York, right outside of the Albany area, home to the great Uncle Sam. And love you guys. Think you guys are fantastic. Can't wait to start reading the book, Raj.
Oh, thank you, Colleen.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited. But my big questions definitely had to deal with cold subs, the idea of cold subs coming in, you know, kind of like a pinch hitter in baseball, if you will. You know, what are your thoughts on the idea of, regardless, obviously the guys were very young, but regardless of age, the idea of bringing on cold sub PK substitutes? What did you guys think of that approach?
It's a great question, Colleen. A great, great question. David?
Yeah, look, I think in hindsight, you know, if they'd won the shootout, we'd be saying, wow, what a great decision to bring them on at the end. And I think in hindsight, you know, I think I heard just briefly the ESPN guys talking about how, he didn't get them on early enough. And so therefore they were too cold coming on. But I think he was still trying to win the game at the end. You know, I think he wanted to win it within extra time. I actually was surprised that Italy weren't really trying to force it. They looked like they wanted to go to penalties. They looked like they didn't want to try and force the action. There was so little football played in extra time, Roger. It was it was difficult. This is one of the problems, by the way, I would say with penalty shootouts is that extra time is not really used as a, genuine attempt to go and win football games. Both teams seem to sort of settle into it a little bit. But I wish they'd come on a little earlier. There were a couple of moments where England could have got them on earlier and they didn't. And I think that ended up making it not that easy for them because they were cold, as you said.
I think your question's the right one, and I don't fully understand it. It's really, particularly that combination of young players just flung in and not able to. You speak to athletes about their nerves, wide receivers before they get to touch the ball for the first time. Young players, when they make their debut under pressure, they always say when they come on, they are just like that moment. We always ask them, and they always talk about those first 20 seconds as just feeling out of body, just overwhelmed by fear. But then they always say within a couple of minutes, you can quickly move it to feel like just another game. And I don't really feel like those kids were given the chance to have the touches and enough involvement in the game to make it feel like just another game. And field goal kickers, in your analogy, Colleen, they're trained for that, to just come on and hit that moment. Footballers do not train for that. And I think ultimately, when we rewind the tape on that penalty shootout, that may be one of the contributing factors that led to England's demise today. Jesse Reader, come be with us. What's your question? And first of all, where you're from?
Hey guys, I'm calling from Binghamton, New York, home of Rod Serling. It's nice to talk to you guys after so many years of listening to the pod. I really appreciate it. I have a sort of a bigger question about the tournament as a whole. As somebody who started my interest in soccer through international soccer, I twice chose my Premier League team based on a standout star from a big international tournament. First time around was Tim Howard in 2014. Loved him, followed him to Everton for a year, tried really hard to be an Everton fan. Sorry, Raj, it didn't stick.
Jesse Reader. I was loving that.
I know. I'm sorry.
Congratulations.
The following summer, 2015, I was lucky enough, my husband and I were lucky enough to be living in Santiago, Chile when the Copa America was there. We got to see the city go mad when they brought it home for the first time to Chile. And after seeing Alexis Sanchez lead that team and to win the whole thing with his ice cold Panenka pen, I became an Arsenal fan and it stuck. So I think the only explanation is I prefer my self-loathing in red, but I've been a miserable gunner ever since. So I was just wondering if you could imagine a world in which you didn't have a Premier League team, is there a standout player from this tournament, somebody with enough tenacity, charisma, talent to make you choose a team?
Great question. Great question. Who did you love? Who is the best player, David? But who did you love? Who thrilled you?
During this tournament, I already said about on England or any team. I think on any team, I think Chiesa ended up sort of like took my breath away again and again and again in this tournament. He was my player of the tournament. And for England, I got to say that, Luke Shaw, I didn't really rate Luke Shaw coming into this tournament. He never really, even during United games when commentators are talking about how great he is, I was like, is he really that great? In this tournament, I thought he became, I'm not sure there's a much better left back playing in Europe right now. I think he's just outrageously good.
I think also the extent to which he was utterly crapped on, not just frozen out. He was deeply humiliated in an ongoing, lengthy, deeply traumatic way by Jose Mourinho. And so to endure that and rise again is humanly beautiful and remarkable. I mean, the serious answer is there are two players that caught my eye in this tournament. One was Jordan Pickford and the other was Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And I'd encourage you to all think likewise. And the team that you should support as a result is Everton Football Club. But failing that, Everton's Chiesa, I think is a thrilling footballer to watch, just how direct and remarkable And it was like how, to be candid, how I thought Phil Foden would play in this tournament. He was the human hand grenade ultimately, and it was a delight and a wonder to watch him play football. And ultimately, the answer for me is Chiellini. To see a man aged 36 just dominate game after game, to play with just a hunger, a desire, a verve, but more than a delight, a passion, there was not a second that he took for granted being out there. I tweeted in the last round that it's like watching a guy that's never forgotten the thrill that football gives him at 11, 12, 13. And ultimately, that's what I take away from that Italian win. That passion, that joy, that sense of human wonder is all that's good about football. I enjoyed every second. Andrew Millington, come on to the stage, mate. Where you from and what's your question?
Hey, guys. Evertonian from Corpus Christi, Texas.
Yes.
So my question is, to what extent will the club coaches have to patch up the mental fortitude of their returning players? Like, if you're Arteta, do you ask Pickford for a referral to his psychologist for Saka? Or do you just treat it as an isolated incident and focus on what they do for the club rather than country?
Andrew, great question. And I think just beyond the psychological help, major tournaments and teams that go far in major tournaments, it really messes up preseason for clubs. And so for these England players and Italian players who are, and particularly for the Premier League, which kicks off pretty early this year, and because of having lost in that tournament, I think that, these boys are going to need a couple of weeks off at least. They're going to miss a large bulk of preseason and are probably, not going to, be completely ready to go when the season starts. I think psychologically, Saka and Rashford and Sancho, from what I know of them and interviews I've read, I think they've dealt with enough adversity in their lives that I think they'll be able to shake this off and do well with it. And I think the nature of the press, Rog, your sort of fear earlier, I think the press has changed enough. I think this England team has enough goodwill at this point that they will be they'll be treated very well by the press and by the vast majority of fans. And I think they're going to be okay. So I don't think they'll need psychological help, but I think it's going to take some time to get all these players back at their clubs. And so for, Manchester City and Manchester United and Chelsea, Arsenal, who have Everton, who have players in this squad, I think it's going to take them some time. Tottenham too, still having, it's also delayed figuring out some of these transfer stuff. So it's going to be a mess.
One of the joys of Euro 2020, and it was a joy, and we should say that before we finish.
Absolutely.
What an incredible tournament this was. What a abundant experience filled with memory and incredible goals and incredible joys and human beings who were all exhausted, but just went for it in completely the right spirit. Not you, Turkey, but everybody really, once we got to the knockout round, these teams just summoned a reserve of energy and passion. Pulling on that national team jersey clearly meant something to almost every footballer in this tournament, probably more because of the lockdown and knowing that what their nation had been through. And I loved it. I really loved every second. I do think these players were exhausted going in. God knows where they are mentally, physically now, really wrecked. Also, some of these young kids. I remember spending some time with Aaron Johansson before the 2014 World Cup. I went to spend time with him in the Netherlands, and his team, Alkmaar, had gone really deep in the Europa League. And he said to me, he's like, my body has never, he played like 60-something games in a season. He said, my body has never played this many games. I don't know how it is coping. It broke down ultimately pretty badly towards the end of that season. And these young guys, mentally, physically, they played so many bloody games in a compressed period of time. I'm sure they are absolutely spiritually knackered. So that would be my worry as well. I think the joy of this England team is, number one, it's a deeply supportive culture. I feel like the US men's national team right now, these players love each other. All the lifting that will need to go on will be done by the players with themselves. And I do believe having Gareth Southgate as a national team manager a warm and wonderful person? Yes, but also a man who has really psychologically handled this team, prepared this team so brilliantly to the end. I think they will be safely handled. They'll go back to their club teams. There'll be some fan abuse by idiots. I'm already seeing on Twitter some conservative politicians telling Rashford to focus on penalties, not politics. There will be arseholes. There are always arseholes. But I think these players, by and large, will be fine and resilient and better, because all of them will be treated. You know, Carlo, before he was dead to me, said that you have to treat players like human beings and not like athletes or just players. And I think that's what's going to be paramount here. Couple more questions, and then we are going to wrap this beauty up and call time on Euro 2020. A year late, Logan Clifford, come be with us on the stage. Tell us where you're from and what's your question?
Hello, gents. I'm Logan. I am from what was Eastern Shoshone land, but is now Salt Lake City, Utah, home of alternate reality World Cup winner Kyle Beckerman.
Oh, Godspeed.
KB5. Yeah, exactly. Also, Raj, I've got my signed first edition of your book.
Rob, thanks for your support, mate.
So
Rob, you've done the double. You've done that's up there with Italy winning the Eurovision and the Euros. Having my book and the audio book is the American equivalent of that. Thanks for your support, you beautiful human being. What is your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my question is, from here, what does the English team do to prepare for the World Cup? Is it a matter of, hey, is there reorganization? Do they look at new tactics, or do they say, hey, look, we made it this far. We did pretty great. Like, let's just move forward and keep our heads up and look to that as our next big challenge. I mean, where do they, how do they keep the momentum, or are there things that they do need to adjust moving forward?
Great question.
I think qualifying is one thing. By the way, Logan, I love that you're the first mention of Roger's first edition of his book, because there are going to be multiple more editions. So I think, first of all, England have to qualify. And qualification in UEFA, it's one of the things that makes UEFA teams very competitive in the World Cup. Qualification is never easy. And they're in the middle of that qualification now. They've had a pretty good start, but it continues to go on. Look, I think what England have to do, to me, one of the disappointing aspects of today is, believe me, I don't think England can play out of the back the whole time, but they really stopped playing out of the back. And you could actually see some arguments going on between Pickford and his defence, ultimately, where Pickford constantly wanted to clear. But you've only got 3 offensive players up the field. And they had to go and build from the back. And I think they got a little bit impatient. And believe me, I think England have to have a combination of playing that long ball over the top to their very, very fast players like Sterling and Rashford. But I think they've got to play the ball from the back. And I think that we've seen tremendous progress from, the centre-backs carrying the ball, from Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips in central midfield. But we've got to get a little bit better at transition from the defensive third up the field. And I think that's where England are gonna focus as they go forward. What do you see, Rog?
I look at a team that, their manager had a plan, which was to play themselves into the tournament game to game to game, and to try and peak towards the end. And cynics will say, Ukraine were crap. You scraped past a very weak Germany. Denmark, we're, good. Not the you were in the easy part of the draw, and then you played one great opponent and you wilted. But I think Southgate's plan is to not concede goals. He'll look at this tournament and see that they did not concede from open play an entire tournament, which is a remarkable feat. And he will look at it and believe that that's how you go again. Like, ultimately, his goal in this game is to stop the opponent from scoring first, stop the opponent from scoring second. Those are his first 2 priorities. That's what he wanted with Declan and Kieran, and with Phillips, and that's what he got, So he will feel he came bloody close. Ultimately they almost scored too early in this one, and I do wonder this strategy of of just hoping that Raz and Kane are going to make magic happen. I once interviewed Pep Guardiola, and I asked him whether football is like jazz once the game kicks off, where the players are like the improv stars just blowing horns and you're just watching, or is it more like the NFL and the Bill Parcells where every single player does exactly what he is told? And Pep laughed. He said, good question. He said, the back line is the NFL. You train the back line over and over and over and over. He said, the front line, it is more like improv jazz. It's John Coltrane. Kun Aguero is John Coltrane, he said. You kind of trust in them. But I do wonder if there's got to be some middle ground in that attacking third. That we're very tight. I wonder if he looks back and looks at this game, and you saw Raz just making solo forays into nowhere in that second half over and over again, that with just a little bit more guile and a little bit more muscle and just readjusting the balance, which is what football's all about, that balance between attack and defence, that this could have been a different feeling on this night.
You know, Rog, I wonder what he's going to do with Grealish, because Grealish never really got a major run out in this tournament. And tonight, I thought he came on and didn't have a lot of time and did a couple of things well, but didn't really, get the ball enough to do a lot with it. And I think that Grealish is seen as being a potential difference maker for England. I was watching our friend Rebecca Lowe and just screaming for Grealish to come on for the entire game. I don't think Grealish is the answer with the way that England currently play, but they might need to find a way of playing that makes Grealish more effective when he comes on.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble with Grealish and Gareth Southgate, when your priorities are to not concede as your first and second priority, then he does not trust Grealish. Grealish has the great flitting moments that we love around the box, but when he watches game film, he watches Grealish lose possession and then not track back, or he watches Grealish jog while Italian opponents are charging through the middle, and that to him is abhorrent. And that ultimately he doesn't trust Grealish enough. That's why Grealish was the late. I mean, it was like the Adama Traore of England. Just go on. I'll give you 10 minutes. Don't F up. And I think it's fascinating. Grealish will develop as a player, and I just wonder if Grealish will develop as a Gareth Southgate player. We will see. We will see. A gorgeous, gorgeous question. We have got one more question of this green. I've loved this green. We are going to keep green rooming all year round through the Premier League. It's been a joy. It's been so great to commune with you. Your excitement that you feel when you get to come onto the stage, we feel it to commune with you. It is vice versa. It is genuinely an utter joy. And the final question goes down to Mr. Rob George. Come up to the stage. Tell us where you are and what's your question.
Hi, guys. I am from Norfolk, Virginia, by way of Petoskey, Michigan.
Gorgeous.
I got to say, I'm really feeling that penalty kick pressure being the last question of the Euro reaction.
Well, come on, just smash it in the top right. Smash it in the top right, Rob.
So I think the two real heroes of today were the pizza and Super Mario combo costumes.
Oh, that was amazing, right?
Of course. So my question is, what would be the England and American food character equivalents of couples' costumes at a game?
Wow. Well, in England would be bangers and mash, fish and chips, scones and jam, scones and cream, tea and crumpets. There are a number of them. What are the great American hamburger and fries? There are a lot of good ones for America too.
I think that we ultimately we see the English one all the bloody time. The English equivalent is just a large, slightly menacing man with his shirt off. And I'm still one of my lingering questions, which I'm still totally befuddled by and still have no great answer about, is why football has become, like a beach, a totally acceptable place for large grown men to take their shirts off in public. So, that's an ongoing